Okay, we're going to continue on with the story of racing and that, and how it come about. This episode here is going to be starting, we'd wrapped up the year in 1978 on the 100 class. This year, now we're going to 1979. So at the beginning of 1979, we get the new bikes come out again around Thanksgiving. So I got a brand new, it was a YZ125F in 1979. Get it around Thanksgiving. It's kind of winter time then, so we just take the bike, and we had a workshop there at my parents' in the back garage and that. So I would always take my brand new bikes, tear them completely down, I mean everything, and go through that bike from the very bottom, every bit and piece. I would drill holes in anything I could to try and lighten it. You know, if there was extra space on the sprocket to take a little bit of weight out, I'd put little holes in it there, foot pegs, wherever I could. But basically go through the bike like that there. At that time, I would have been 16 years old yet, turned 17 this year in May, in a junior in high school. Was also enrolled in the Votech program, machine shop at Votech. And down there, we had all our projects in that we had to do for grades and such, but we're also allowed to do our own little private projects there. So I had a whole machine shop there where I could take stuff in and do my own work. As long as you got your other projects done, the machines were available to us. So I was very fortunate that way. So I had a complete machine shop, surface grinders, mills, lathes, EDM machines, different things like that to use. So I'd taken that bike, I built my own motor that year, pulled the crank out, did what I called a turbo crank, basically put it on a tool and cutter grinder and cut fins, directional fins, picture them like fan blades in a sense, kind of at an angle, crossways on there, across the surface of the crank part itself. And the idea, or my idea at that point in time, was to take the fuel mixtures that was coming in from, comes through your reed valves, pulled in through the back ports into the cylinder, that the spinning of the crank would direct the flow of the fuel. One, it would help mix the fuel to help atomize the fuel with the air better, just by creating a turbulence there in the crank. And also it would direct, basically picture it like a fan or a turbo, directing that fuel mixture out and up the ports, which are located at the side of the cylinder. So I did that to it, along with porting. You would take the cylinder, basically take like a Dremel tool, and any of the leading edges where the fuel would come through, I would knife them out super sharp, picture like the air coming into something, it'll pass over a sharp edge or a blade much easier than a blunt surface. So it took a Dremel tool, you'd port your cylinders, you'd widen them out a little bit. The theory there is the larger you can get the port, the more fuel you can get into the cylinder, the more power the engine will make. It's the whole idea of just getting a smooth flow from the time the fuel passes through the carburetor in through the reeds into the cylinder. You want to get as much fuel into that cylinder as possible and direct it in there and then out through the exhaust chamber. But anyway, had the machine shop there. The teacher there was Charles Gensmer, very good teacher, but he let us, and again, just let us use the machines, and he knew what I was doing and knew I was racing in that. So we'll go on a little bit. And, the prior year I'd met Dave Klasen and Clay Marsteller, also were racing. Knew Clay from a ways back, but Dave was a friend of his, also racing. And at that time, Clay had started Lakeside Cycles, I believe probably the prior year, which was a Bultaca dealership. Later, well, it must have been around 79, I believe he took on Can-Am. So he had the two franchises there, the Bultacas and the Can-Ams. So anyway, both Clay and Dave are a little bit older than me. I'm going to say probably about 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that. at the time, Dave was working down at Pope, over towards Franklin. And so he had a pretty decent job for a young age, for all the older he was. So Dave was really into racing as well. And here I am, I'm only, 16 years old, going to turn 17. Don't have a driver's license. And so Dave essentially, wants to travel and go racing. We're going to step out and go to some tracks, up till this point. I'd only been into racing a little bit, but we're doing just local tracks and that. So Dave got the finances and that to be able to do it. I mean, not wealthy by any means, but he is working a job, and as a young teenager, or maybe in his early 20s at that time, he's willing to put everything he's making into racing. So Dave buys a pickup truck with a truck camper on the back, and also an enclosed trailer. I believe it was just like a small single axle 10-foot enclosed trailer. So we had that there to travel in, and Dave basically wanted somebody else to go along, and I live right in the neighborhood, so Dave takes me along. So every weekend then, almost every weekend, we're going to load up on Saturdays and head out. At that time, races was always on Sunday. They'd be start early Sunday and run all day Sundays wherever you were going. So we would load up, Saturday, whatever time we needed to, so that we could get to the destination. A lot of times would be there before dark. Get there, set up. We would stay in the camper and spend the night, race the next morning. Because races always started very early in the morning. So if you were driving, like, say, to High Point, which is basically a 2-hour trip for us, and sign up starting pretty early in the morning, we wouldn't have to get up, no 5 o'clock in the morning to be leaving. We could stay there in the camper, get up in the morning, you're already at the track. Also give you a place to change and stay in out of the weather, stuff like that. So it was a very nice setup. So anyway, me and Dave's going to start traveling now. We got the camper, the trailer, and that, and start traveling some this year. So, and I got different stories that's going to go along with some of this here. So here we go, 1979. This is February. This here's still in winter. We used to get pretty harsh winters around here, but February 17th, 1979. This here's going to be the very first race of the year, which would be at the Harrisburg Farm Show Arena. They had an indoor arena there, and you used to be able to go out there. Well, not sure if they do it yet today or not, but and this was probably the very beginnings, really, of Arenacross, where they would hold indoor races in a stadium or an arena. So the date was February 17th, was going to be for that race. So I got a brand new bike. I have never ridden this bike yet. I just moved up from a 100 class, had 100 before and got a 125. So I never rode the bike, had barely ever even been started. I mean, I started it up and let it idle there at the garage, for a slight break-in and that. So the motor really wasn't even broken or anything. Never been on the bike, no practice time or nothing. And here we go. We load up and head off to Harrisburg. So that year now I'm going to be in the 125 class. So we go out there and I sign up in, it's the 125B class. And the Farm Show Arena, I see here in my notes, and I'm pulling some of this because I used to keep basically a journal of the races. At the end of each weekend, I just basically write down where the race was, any key highlights or anything, and maybe how many bikes were there. So there was 40 in the 125 class, but you would have to go through qualifying to make the main. They always held the mains then on Saturday evening. All during the day, they would run qualifiers and that. It was primarily just the people racing there. And then Saturday evening, not sure what time it started, but then they would open up the arena basically to the general public, where they would come in and, be spectators in the arena. And so made the main event. You had to qualify down. The qualifiers would have been 40 bikes. but only 20 were going to make the main event. So made it into the main event and ended up taking a 3rd place overall. First time ever on that bike and just starting in the 125 class. So things are starting out pretty good. Very good results. Wasn't quite expecting that, but come out of there with the 3rd place overall. Now I've got a couple unique stories that go along with this weekend there. One of them being, and I believe it was this year, it was either in 79 or 78. So we're sitting there in they always staged you in the tunnel area. And then they would let you out into the arena for up to the starting line. And there was security guards across there and that. Primarily it was only the racers that were allowed out in that staging area of the races. So we're sitting there, and there is, at that time, she would have been a teenager and probably one of her friends along, but it was Carrie Jo Coombs, and just barely even knew who they were because her dad was a promoter, did High Point Raceway. But at that time everything was in the beginning years, so okay, he was a promoter of a local race, but she comes out, and I just remember this here event happening was that she comes walking along, and for whatever reason, once out on the floor area, and the security guard stops her and won't let her through. Well, apparently Carrie Jo thought since her dad was a promoter at High Point, give her privileges to go out, and she kind of started to let the security guard know who she was, you know, who her dad was, things like that. And anyway, it wasn't allowed out there on the floor area. And so I guess a little bit of this story is, if you can't imagine in yourself where you're going to be some years later, and you already think that you are something now, even as a young teenager, sometimes that does lead you to where you're going to end up. So I'll show you a little bit of where the Coombs family made it to now that the dad has passed. And they were probably there at Harrisburg because at that time Timmy and Davey were both racing. Not sure what class they were in yet, so I'm guessing they were out there because the 2 kids were racing as well. So this here little video will just show you where Carrie Jo is today. So
the most coveted title in the world for the athletes who race dirt bikes for a living is this one.
The sacrifice, the preparation, the commitment. This is when you got to go out there and finally put a stamp on it.
You've got to. World Championship. I'm Daniel Blair. This is Jason Wygant. I want to thank all the fans who are tuning in right now from all over the country and all over the world for this press event. To all of our friends here in the media, in the industry, team personnel, riders, former and past champions. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you all in October on a... So that is why we're going to have another coming together of Supercross and Motocross here to crown the world champion next October. And to get an idea of where this vision came from and how long it has taken to finally get to this place, we're going to welcome our guest to the stage. It's the CEO of MX Sports Pro Racing and the Pro Motocross Championship, Carrie Coombs Russell. And the CEO and chair of Fell Motorsports, and to crown the world champion next October.
So I just wanted to share that little story. And again, at that time, Carrie, just a young teenager. Today, she is the CEO of MX Sports, which would be, and her brother Davey also runs that. They're the head of all the outdoor nationals when you watch them on TV and that. But so that just gives a little background at the very beginning years where they were even at that point. And today when you watch Supercross or outdoor nationals on TV, it's the outdoor parts they are the head of. So kind of a little bit of history there and how it follows along with the racing years when I was into racing. So that same weekend, so we race there, have good results. We go to Lee, and on the, okay, I'll back up a little bit. On the way out there that weekend, so we leave that weekend, and it's me, myself, Dave, and Clay's dad, Claire. We go out and on the day before and take Dave's pickup with his camper. The three of us are in the pickup, and Clay and Butch Marsteller, Butch is Clay's cousin, also a friend of ours. But anyway, they're going to take Butch's pickup, and they're coming out that same day, and we're all going to spend the night out there. We're staying in the Dave's camper. So Clay and Butch, on the way out, they're traveling out. They got the Bull Tacos, their bikes, loaded in the back of Butch's pickup, and they're coming out the interstate. And I'm not sure what happened. Something breaks down with the pickup. This is out on Interstate 80, traveling out to Harrisburg. They're crossing out through there. Anyway, the pickup breaks down. Now this is, picture this, this is in the winter time too. They're a mile or so from the exit, and they need to get off the exit and get up there to get a part or something to fix the pickup. So they unload one of the Bull Tacos out of the back of the pickup, start it up, and the two of them ride this thing down Interstate 80 to the next exit to get whatever it was they needed, and then back to fix the pickup. So just a unique little story, kind of funny things that would happen at the time, but that's just how things were back then, you know, and we would always just make it work out and that. So anyway, we're staying there at the races, and it was a 2-day event. Also, there was something going on the following day, and at that time they had these little, once you entered into the arena, they give you, it was basically a piece of string with a little tin clip thing that clipped over that string, and that was your pass that you used to get in and out, you know, as you come and go from the arena. So first day was blue ones, second day was going to be red. Well, we were always figuring out ways where, okay, we'd already got in for the first day and the second day, so we went and got red fingernail polish, a bottle of that, to paint the little metal clasps red for our admission the next day, rather than having to go through and get them again. So each one of us, we painted our little clasps. So we had the bottle of red fingernail polish that in the camper there with us. And later that evening, Claire used to like to drink some, and he got a little bit drunk and kind of passed out. So he's laying there passed out with his mouth partly open, and Butch gets the bright idea. We're always pulling pranks, so Butch takes this red fingernail polish and paints Claire's two front teeth, upper teeth, red. Puts the fingernail polish on them, and so Claire has two red teeth. So next morning, wakes up, and some of the red was gone, but a lot of it was still there on his teeth, and nobody wants to tell him. So we just let it go, and nobody even mentioned to him. So he's walking into the thing and has his red teeth. Don't really remember how that ended up or when he found out, but just kind of a unique little story that went along with this. So that happens that weekend, and then we go to leave. I believe the races were over. I don't know if it was Sunday evening or whatever. Spend the night. We get up the next morning, go to leave. We're pulling out, just leave the exit of the arena there in Dave's pickup, and we'd no more than pulled out. And the transmission, for whatever reason, forward or drive goes out of the transmission. So reverse still worked. So we backed it back into the parking lot and decided that Dave was going to ride back, since Butch's pickup was there. He was going to ride back with them. Me and Clay were going to stay there with the pickup and camper, which we did, and those guys left and come back. Dave then was going to get a hold of, I think, Jim, who had a auto repair thing and a flatbed. So I think they put the trailer behind Butch's pickup, pulled it back, and just left the truck with the camper there, as I remember it. But anyway, me and Clay stay behind. with the truck and camper. So they're not going to be back till the following day. Races are over. The arena's going to be shut up, and that me and Clay's going to stay in the parking lot in the camper. Somehow me and Clay found there was one of the doors to the facility that was unlocked, or we got back in, and we just put a little thing in that door to keep it ajar. It looked like it was closed, but the latch wasn't quite snapped shut, so we could go back in the arena. Kind of give us something to do while we're waiting, because we're going to be there for a day or so. This is in the winter time as well, February, and I believe it was late evening. The propane runs out on the camper, so we have no heat as well. We're staying in the camper in the winter, no heat, but we can bundle up pretty warm to sleep in that. But anyway, so me and Clay's going back into the arena, and this is a big facility. I mean, there's a lot of other areas, like where they show areas and that floor areas besides the arena, and the security guards in there traveled around basically in a golf cart, so we would hear them coming way before they'd ever get to us, and we'd just get back in a hallway or a doorway or something and hide out. But so we go in there, and when the races ended at that time, for whatever reason, the concession stands, they just basically disconnect all the lines from the CO2 taps and that ran up for pop and stuff. But like popcorn machines, they didn't even empty them out. Some of them still had popcorn left in them. Apparently they don't come back for several days till they clean that all up. I don't know, but the machine still had popcorn in them. There was snack stuff there and all that. So me and Clay's going in there, and we hitched up a tap so we'd get some pop to drink, but somehow we got one of the lines crossed, and I don't know if we had Coke coming out of cherry line or something for pop and that, and had plenty of snacks to eat. So we're just killing time going around here in the arena and hiding out from the security guards whenever they'd come around. And the lights are all out in there, and so we get in the arena, and they still had the starting lights for that they used. It was basically like a instead of a card at that time holding it up for a 30-second card, it was like a traffic light, red, yellow, green, and the green signal for 30 seconds. So anyway, we get there and we're messing with that and get them to come on. So we're messing with them there and that, shut them back out. Never got caught by any security guards or anything, but just another little story of hanging out there, getting back into the arena, messing around there and that, until then eventually the following day, I believe it was, Jim and Dave come back with their tilt bed to winch the truck up on, and we all went back. So just a little story goes along with that one particular race. A lot of things happened that weekend. So I'll continue on now with the races. So first race indoors, Harrisburg Farm Show grounds. Then March 11th, we're going to Rocky Ridge. This here's down by McDonald, PA, I believe was the closest town around there. It's down below. Go down to the Pittsburgh airport and head out, maybe across towards the Ohio border, out in that area somewhere, was where Rocky Ridge was. So it was me, Dave, and Clay go down there, go down on a Saturday evening, spend the night, and for whatever reason, apparently since, hey, I started out, I already had a third in the 125B class, I get the idea, okay, I'm going to skip and go straight to the A class. And at that time, the A class was, there was an extreme amount of competition back here for District 5 in the A class. A little later on, I'll get into who some of the competitors were there, but a fair number of them actually held national numbers, which would be for the A class and pro. Basically, how that works, you go to the local race, any local race, and they would have, say, like 125B would be your amateur, 125A would be your expert division or pro. So anybody that's holding a pro license, running nationals and that is the class. It's just at a local event. It's called an A event. So, or A class. So I get the idea, okay, I'm just going to jump straight into the expert class. Not going to go through the B class. I had good results that first race, taking a third, going straight to A. So sign up 125A class. Very first moto, I had a 7th place. And also a side note here, Sam Fodia was there, took a 3rd. Sam was one of the top racers which could win the A class fairly often in that at that point in time. But anyway, I finished a 7th first moto. Second moto, I had a 14th. Probably not bad finish for just jumping right into the A class, but 14th, that just kind of wasn't the greatest for me. Wasn't counting that as a good race. So the following weekend, March 18th, Rocky Ridge is running again. We go back there. And again, sign up in the 125A class. That weekend there, first moto I take a 15th. Second moto I take a 21st. Kind of a little wake-up lesson that, hey, these guys are pretty fast. So I decide to, okay, I'm just going to stay in the B class. And at that point in time, you really weren't allowed. Once you moved to A class, you're supposed to stay there. But hey, these 2 races, and again, you know, kind of in my beginning years, not many really knew who I was that much. Some people probably from my results at Harbor Woods and that, but getting out a little bit. So I'm going to move back to the B class, and nobody ever said nothing. I did get away with doing that, and rightfully so. I should have stayed in the B class and worked my way up through there before I ever go to the A class. So fast forward a little bit. Next weekend, March 25th, we're going to Harbor Woods. This here was kind of our local track in Newcastle, PA. But it ends up, it's going to be a national amateur qualifier. Well, this is in '79, and at that point, this was before Loretta Lynn's. I don't think Loretta Lynn's actually started. Very first Loretta Lynn's amateur nationals was probably around, I'm going to say 82, maybe 81, somewhere in there. I think it was 82, not sure. But prior to that, the AMA themselves actually, and I believe it was them, it was an AMA Amateur Nationals. They did them. It was just a different format than what it was after Loretta Lynn's started or began. So this is before Loretta Lynn's was ever even formed. And at that time the format was for your national amateur qualifiers, it was a series that you would do, I believe it was like either 6 or 8 races, kind of more at your local tracks and that. And this here was a nationwide thing, but you would have to go and you would do this small series, and if you made it through that, then you would advance on to your next step. Not sure how it actually worked after that. You'd make it to your next step, and then they would qualify down for the nationals. So when they called it amateur nationals, it truly was. I mean, they would eliminate down to your champion out of the entire United States. It was just known as at the amateur level. So we go to Harbor Woods, and this here is a national amateur qualifier. They had 60 bikes there in my class that day, which was the 125B class, back in the B class, 60 bikes signing up. And whenever they would do that, the starting gate, primarily most tracks will only hold 40 bikes. So they would run like qualifiers. You would have to qualify in the morning to make it. They would narrow it down to the top 40, and then the 40 would go off. So that day then I end up first moto, I take a second place, and second moto I take a third. Now this would have been in the main. So out of the overall then, out of the top 40, I took a second overall for the day. So pretty good results, being that very first year really in the 125 class. So then April 1st must have been the following weekend, because we pretty much went almost every single weekend somewhere we would try and go. It's back to Harbor Woods again. This weekend there was 63 bikes, 125 class. I was 125B again. First moto I take a second. Second moto I take a seventh. So the following weekend, April 8th, this is going to be High Point, Mount Morris, PA, and High Point was running, at that point in time, they used to run, basically you would have your general weekends, you know, but they would also still do the Pro Nationals, but this here was not a Pro National weekend, but they are holding a National Amateur Qualifier. So this here was probably the second round of the 120 of the National Amateur Qualifiers for the AMA. Again, in the 125 class, we go to High Point Raceway for that one. First moto I took a fifth. Second moto I took an eighth. And just as a side note that I had noted here, injuries are pretty common in motocross. I mean, it's inevitable. If you do it enough, you're going to get injured. But it wasn't me that weekend, but Matt Manfredi lived over by Lake Latonka. Matt's a pretty good rider. He's also held his pro license and that. And he was riding a 250, but I got a note here. Matt was a friend, so knew who he was in that. Matt wrecked that weekend, and it was on the start. High Point had an uphill start. I believe they still run it the same way today. You go up, you make a very fast right-handed sweeper, start down a downhill there. It's all on the start. And it was just starting off that sweeper into the downhill. And we're standing there and you see Matt's bike and that fly up, clear up in the air, up above the other bikes. Don't know what he hit, what happened, why he wrecked. But anyway, Matt ends up getting hauled off in the ambulance. He ends up down in Morgantown in the hospital down there. He ruptured his small intestine, broke his arm, and must have been from the ruptured intestine or spleen. I'm not sure. I had intestine, but I thought it was his spleen. Anyway, it ends up, Matt spends then the next 4 weeks in the hospital down there. Just a side note here I had on that weekend of what had happened. Following weekend, April 15th, Buckeye, Ohio. Go over there. Buckeye, Ohio was over towards Ravenna, somewhere over in that area. It was a big, they were building some type of outdoor stadium arena thing or something over there. But this was an outdoor race. We go over to that one there. And I got the first moto I took second, and second moto I just got a question mark, but I ended up with the third overall at Buckeye there. Following weekend, April 22nd, back to Harbor Woods. First moto, got the whole shot, took a fifth. Second moto, I got listed here bad start, and had a 17th, so not too good of a weekend that weekend. Following weekend, back to Harbor Woods. First moto took a fifth, second moto took a sixth. Had whole shotted both motos, first moto and second moto got the whole shot, but ended up with the fifth and sixth, had a sixth overall. Following weekend, we go to Green Acres. If I'm correct, Green Acres was somewhere down around Shippingport, PA. So anyway, go down there, Green Acres, first moto a second, second moto a sixth, had a third overall. Following weekend, May 13th, Harbor Woods, and primarily if Harbor Woods was running, since it was local and close, we were going there. It's just weekends they weren't running, we would travel out and go out elsewhere. So May 13th, back to Harbor Woods. First moto I got a second. Second moto I got a note here, I hit the starting gate and ended up with a sixth in the second moto, ended up third overall. So May 27th, back to Harbor Woods. First moto a second, second moto a fourth, third overall. May 28th, back to Harbor Woods. First moto a seventh, second moto a fourth, fifth overall. June 10th, back to Harbor Woods. That track used to run a lot back at that time. So first moto, whole shot, got a second, and second moto got canceled due to lightning. Now that was very rare. That rarely ever happens, but I did have a second place overall that weekend. But that's another thing. In motocross, it's always, they run rain, shine, storms, whatever. It's very rare. I mean, they nearly never cancel due to weather. When you go to a motocross race, it's whatever the conditions are going to be. Other than extreme lightning, apparently they will, a lot of times they'll just, if it's storming, they will just pause till it lets up and then resume and start again. Or I've been there before where they'll decide if it's really bad, maybe they will do one long moto instead of two separate motos, simply because your bike's going to be near trashed after a mud race like that. But anyway, that day there they did cancel because of lightning. Following weekend, June 15th, they're starting, and I believe this was probably Musquire's. Musquire's was Leland's dad that did Harbor Woods, promoted that track down there, but I believe it was him was doing this here. They started, it's called the apparently Pepsi was sponsoring this because they called it the Pepsi-Cola Super Series, and it was going to be a series or a number of races held, and then they would crown the overall champion at the end. So that begins. And this here's at Lawrence County, I believe it was at the fairgrounds. Their night race is held under lights at night. So a little different format. It's going to be a little bit supercross style, you know, like jump, much shorter track than an outdoor track, but a lot of jumps and obstacles. So first moto, grab the whole shot, and I win that one. Second moto, whole shot again, and first overall. That's probably the first time that I ever had done that. Took the first overall. I believe this was my very first one ever, winning 2 motos straight with the overall. Following weekend, going to Hughes. This here was called Huggy Bear. We called it Hughes because the family Hughes owned it was a farmlands, and this was down out of Mercer towards going towards West Middlesex, I believe, off of 318 down Orchard Road out in that area. So, and they run their track a little different. In the morning when you would show up there, they called it more European style. Their track was, it would not be disc or nothing, and it was totally natural terrain. They didn't build jumps or nothing. But this was on a big hillside in a basically a farm, and the grass would be mowed down. But in the morning when you arrived, the track would be entirely green grass. It would not be disced up or nothing, and no jumps. It was just natural terrain, which there was like a ravine there. You would jump down into the ravine and jump up out. Another small jump somewhere on the track, just natural terrain. And they did have a really nice downhill or uphill depending on which direction you were running that weekend. But that, just a little bit of notes on that track and how it was run. And they also had a starting gate. They built a gate out of steel. I think it was a forward falling starting gate. At that time, most of the tracks were still using rubber band starts. But they did have a starting gate there. And so we run there, took a 4th in the first moto and a 6th in the second moto. So following weekend was back to Lawrence County, the Pepsi-Cola Super Series, night races, because this was on the 22nd. So we run Friday night. First moto I take a 4th, second moto I win that one, took a 2nd overall. Then that Sunday, because now we're starting to get into, if there was Friday night races and Sunday races, we would go do the Friday night race, then go from there over, spend the night Saturday night then, and just go right to whoever was running on Sunday and race there. So we go to Harbor Woods on the 24th, which would have been that Sunday then, and run first moto I take a 4th, second moto I take a 3rd overall. following weekend, July 7th, we go to High Point. This here's the weekend of the Pro Nationals, and at that time they still had the 500 class, so it was a 250 500 Pro Nationals. So we're going back there, and so I'm going to transition now over. I do have a few photos from 1979, not a whole lot, but I do have a few from that weekend. So I'll go over to them there. And before I do, I'll just give my results here. I'll probably forget them. First moto there, I had an 11th. Second moto, I had a 12th. So I'm going to go over to a photo book I got just to give a little bit of. Okay. So this here would have been the weekend of the Pro Nationals, High Point, 1979. This would be, now we went down, we would go there, wouldn't be down there even like maybe on a Thursday. We would go down and stay there, you know, clear through for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we were set up, and this here would be right at the top of the hill. If you were in the starting gate, and if you come to the top of the hill and you went straight through, you would have run directly right into where we were pitted. There's Dave's truck and camper, and my bike and Dave's camper. And I believe the motorhome right next to us would have been Clary's. There was a girl, Tina Clary, that used to race, and they were staying there. Anyway, another little unique story to go along with this is that weekend, and we were always screwing around, playing pranks on people and that. And Dave's camper there, you could get up on the roof of that camper and sit up there. That way there is a better spectating view from the top of the camper. So we're sitting up top of the camper, and Dave gets down for some reason. He's down below, and there's a bucket of water there, and I'm up top so I can see what's going on. Now this here, the picture is from before all the people were there, but during that weekend of the Pro Nationals, this place gets packed. So anyway, there I'm up top of the camper, Dave's down behind it, and I go to the back of the roof there and holler down to Dave. I said, Dave, here comes Tina. She's going to be walking up alongside, because I see this lady coming. It's not Tina, but I'm telling Dave that it is. And he has a bucket of water, so just as a prank, when she steps around the side of the camper, he's going to let her have it with this bucket of water. And it's not Tina, it's this lady that's coming back beside the pickup, walking back there. But Dave thinks it's her, and the lady steps out and he throws that whole bucket of water right on her. Needless to say, she wasn't happy, but don't remember how that ended up. I think she probably had a few words to say in that, but it was just another one of them pranks you did as a kid in that. Another story that goes along with we're always into something. I mean, all the time, some types of something was going on. It wasn't always just the races, it was just the whole event, the things that went on outside of that. So these pictures then are also from High Point that weekend. This here would have been the first turn there, probably from like almost right up top Dave's camper looking down. That would have been about the vantage point we had. So this would have been High Point in 1979 that weekend. This was the start. This here was probably I'm believing it was the 250 class, because I can kind of see probably about the third back there on the start. This here probably was the 250 Pro Nationals, and I think the guy in the yellow and black, I think that was Mike Misko. Also from Newcastle, Mike used to run Mike held his pro license and he used to travel around, do some of the Pro Nationals and that. But this here was Pro National weekend, and I believe that was Mike in that start. This here's also that weekend. don't remember who won that day. I believe it was, very well could have been Bob Hanna. He was pretty dominant at that time. These here are just more from, yeah, I'd say it was probably Bob, because I think on this start that is probably Bob right there at the very front there, leading the start. That would have been Bob Hanna as well. After this here was probably, I'm guessing that was Marty Tripes. Not sure who's in that one. Not sure who is in that one. And while I'm here at the photo album, I'm just going to go through and capture some of the other pictures from 1979. This one here would have been, this here was the first corner on a start at Harbor Woods. That was, I believe, me grabbing a hole shot. The very first one on the yellow bike. My bikes were yellow in that. Next photo over, that was also at Harbor Woods, another track there. This here is another start, Harbor Woods. That again, very first corner on the start. You can tell by how many bikes are all jammed in there. That would have been me probably in the lead right there, pulling the hole shots. Over all my years, I typically got very good starts. Sam Fodia. Sam always had really long hair. His hair would be sticking out the back of his helmet. And Sam was one of the first ones. He could really do some pretty good, at that time we called them cross-ups, but Sam could kind of lay the bike out flat and have the wheel locked up to the side. And at that time, that was way before freestyle and that, with the big tricks and where they really got into the whips and that. This would have been Leland, also at Harbor Woods. That same jump as that I was doing up above here, but that would have been Leland Musquire. Leland was kind of like, he was a pretty fast rider, actually. He run minis in the earlier year, then was up to the series on a 125. But Leland was one of the first ones I remember doing no hands over a set of doubles. Took both hands off and clapped his hands above his head, which was kind of a big deal then. Far cry from what it has progressed to today. This next picture that's Billy Payton, who Billy's dad, I rode out of Phil's Yamaha, and Billy's dad owned the Yamaha dealership. But that's Billy, and we were over at Buckeye, Ohio, race over there. Not sure who was taking these pictures, because they were from the old like the instant camera and that. That was Dave there. Dave was riding a Can-Am, I can tell because he has the Can-Am jersey and that on. And that's Dave's trailer. That was me. There's another one of myself. Another one. This one over here. This here is myself, quite young at the time. This is also 1979, and that was with Roy Hamer's mother, and this here was at Hughes in Mercer. This was a pass or a ticket, complimentary pass for at Hughes. Don't really remember why they gave us complimentary passes, but I believe me and Dave both got them. This was just our admission ticket from Trailways Speedway. That would have been the Harrisburg event that year. This would have been my 1979 125, and actually that was probably one of my best bikes that I remember ever. I mean, it performed really well. And I had done my own motor on that one there. But that was at Buckeye, Ohio, 1979. And this photograph here was at Harbor Woods, and that would have been Kenny Stafford, Doreen Stafford. Doreen was actually Clark, was her maiden name. Nancy, my aunt. I believe it's my brother there. And back there would have been my bike. And that would have been my uncle Ronnie Clark, which is Donnie Clark's father, which he later passed of cancer quite a few years ago. I'm going to say probably somewhere around 86, somewhere in there. So this would have been in 79 with Nancy and Ronnie when he was still alive, my brother. Doreen, that's the backside of Doreen there, and Nancy and Kenny in the orange shirt sitting in the lounge chair. So again, that's just very limited photos from 1979. Don't have a whole lot of them. Not sure on, there's some of the different money envelopes from when I did do some A-class races and that from that year. Now I'm going to go back over and so that would have been the weekend at High Point that I just went over, and then also went over the other photos of that year. Then July 13th, back to Lawrence County. Friday night again. First in the first moto, second in the second moto, took first overall. So this is a series again, that Pepsi-Cola Super Series, and I'm doing very well within this series, winning a lot. First and seconds, it's going to be hard. So I'm doing really well in there. I'm not sure which one of the races in there, but I see one coming up here, so I'll tell kind of the story of added in at that one. But so the following weekend, July 15th, back to Harbor Woods, and for some reason I run a 250 that weekend. I don't know why, or why I got the 250 in there. I don't know if my bike was broke down or something, so I raced somebody else's. Don't know where I got the 250 from or whatever on that weekend, but first moto I had a 7th, and then second moto it says didn't run, the bike didn't start, so not sure whose bike I was even riding, but run the 250 class. Had a 7th in the first moto. The following weekend, July 22nd, back to Harbor Woods. First moto I get the whole shot, had a 3rd. Second moto got the whole shot again, had a 2nd, took a 2nd overall. July 27th, back to Lawrence County. Now, not sure what weekend it was, but I do know that in that series, I'm winning the series, leading the overall points in that in the series. And at that point in time, it wasn't uncommon. You could have a bike failure. Something would happen. You'd blow up a bike or something and wouldn't be able to get parts. You know, Phil was always really good at trying to locate them wherever, you know, from another dealer, get them shipped in to always keep you going. But for some reason, I do know one of the weekends, and I do believe maybe it was a gear, one of the transmission gears, which wouldn't be a common part that they probably stocked at the dealership, and maybe that's why I couldn't get it. But my bike was broke, the race was coming up, I'm leading this series. So Kenny Vath, Kenny Vath was a mechanic in at Phil's, and he also had a 125. So Kenny let me use his bike for that one of the weekends. Not sure if it was this weekend, but I know one of the races out of the series I did do on Kenny Vath. So Kenny let me pick up his bike, set it up how I wanted it or whatever, use it for one of those races. But anyway, back to Lawrence County, July 27th. Won both motos. Again, first overall. August 3rd, back to Lawrence County. Friday night race. Won both motos. Hole shotted both motos and won both motos. First overall. So at this point in time, my results are starting to really come around in the 125B class. So I already got my mind made up. I can't move right now because I'm in this series, leading the series for the that Pepsi-Cola Super Series. So I can't move out of the B class yet, but I've already decided as soon as that series is wrapped up, I am going to the A class. That's going to be my transition from the B class up into the A class. So that same weekend, it had to be a Sunday because I see we run the 3rd. Now we're running again the 5th at Harbor Woods. And first moto I took a 3rd. Second moto I got the hole shot, took the first overall. Wrecked in that moto and still got the first overall. So I'm pretty much straight first places now. Straight through, week after week and Friday nights. So I am going to go to the A class. August 12th, back to Harbor Woods. Not sure what happened this weekend because here I got that for some reason I'm racing Mike Misko's RM125. Mike, another guy, friend, but Mike raced as well. He raced 250 and 125, but for some reason he let me race his 125 that weekend. And I got here, I hit the starting gate and then had a 10th place finish. So not sure what happened, but I'd never been on an RM, wouldn't even be familiar with the bike, but I'm racing Mike's bike. No practice time on it or nothing. Had a 10th place finish. August 14th, this here was a Tuesday night. This here was the final main event for that Pepsi-Cola Super Series there at Lawrence County. This is the main event, the final one. I qualified for the #1 position, and for whatever reason that night, must have had a bad night, but I had a 4th and a 5th, took a 3rd overall, but even with that, I had enough points that I did take the that Gold Cup, took the overall for that Lawrence County Pepsi-Cola Super Series. So the following weekend, August 20th, we go to Mercer. This here's at Hughes. I'm now in the 125A class. First moto, took a 9th. Second moto, I pulled the hole shot, ended up back in 11th by the end of the race. So August 26th, Harbor Woods, 125A class. First moto I had an 8th, grabbed the hole shot, took an 8th. Second moto I had a 6th. So September 2nd, Harbor Woods, first moto, got the hole shot, took a 3rd. Second moto, took an 8th. Following weekend, no, it must have been a 2-day event that weekend, which occasionally they would do that. They would race a Saturday and Sunday because I got a September 2nd and September 3rd, both at Harbor Woods. That had to have been one of the 2-day events. Still in the 125A class. First moto, I got a notation here. Brakes jammed and had to stop to fix it in the middle of the race. Got it going. Don't know what jammed up or what happened there, but I ended up with the 21st. Second moto, I took a 13th. So now September 8th, we're going back to Lawrence County, but that Pepsi-Cola series is already over. This is just another, I got a note here, it's the fall series, whatever that was. Friday night race, September 8th. First moto I took a 5th, second moto I took a 5th. September 10th, back to Mercer. First moto I took a 15th, second moto a 17th. These are all in the A class. September 23rd, we go to Ohio International. Ohio International, they used to do, I think, a Mid-Am or Trans-Am race over there. Don't remember what they called it, but anyway, we always called it Ohio International. It was by Ravenna, Ohio. Over there, they just strictly call it Pro. They had a 125 Pro class. They also had 250 and probably an Open at that time. So running their 125 Pro class, first moto had a 10th, second moto I had a 9th. September 30th, we go to Buckeye, Ohio. I took a first moto a 6th, second moto I took a 4th. Then November 4th, which must have been the final race of the year before winter, last one of the year, I got a note here. It was very muddy, so they ran one long moto. Back then I believe they were doing pretty much 20 minutes and 2 laps for the A class. So I don't know what they run that day, but I just got a note there, run one long moto because of mud, and I took a 4th overall in that moto. So that would have wrapped up the year 1979. Now, since some of the up and coming years here that we're going to be going through, I got a lot of notes to add into in that. So I guess I'll do this one now. Kind of a sad note that Dave, that I traveled with a lot, you know, as a teenager, even in the later years than that, and we've become very good friends. I mean, we traveled all over, later to Florida, to in the winter. We did a lot of traveling together. Other states, all over the place racing. This would have been later in the, you know, like 80, 81, 82, in that era, in the coming years. But I was very fortunate that Dave basically took me into travel. At this point in time, I would have never been able to do what I had done, probably, if it wasn't for Dave, because that's how I got to the races at my young ages, you know, earlier years, and even before I had a driver's license or anything. So I was very fortunate, and Dave always had a nice rig, like having the camper and trailer. Later on, you know, much nicer vans and trailers and stuff in that I got to travel in. And that was all because of Dave. If it wasn't for him, I probably, honestly, I'd have to say I would not have ever made it as far as I did into racing. So very grateful for him. But here this past year, which now we're now in 2024. So it was in 2023, I'm going to say more towards the springtime. I'm sitting here at I own a sign shop, sitting here at the sign shop, the phone rings one day, and it's Dave. And this is just this past spring, 2023. Dave calls me and he says, hey, which he would do. He would call every now and then, and sometimes he'd stop by different things. But so I get a phone call from him, not uncommon. He says, hey, I'm in here at the hospital, and he said, hey, come in. He was back from one of his jobs or whatever, and he had been having some trouble with kidney stones. And he thought it was acting up a little bit, so he thought, hey, before he heads back down to DC for this job that he was on, he was going to run in here to the hospital, get it checked out, maybe they'd give him some medication, and then he'd go back down to DC. since he was back home. So he goes into the hospital thinking he has a problem with kidney stone, and he calls me up and he says, I'm sitting in here waiting from the doctor, but they had just come in and told me I got leukemia. And so we talked a little bit, and it was like kind of a shock. He didn't even like, okay, what's this mean? You know, heard of leukemia, know it's a bad disease, but don't even know what it is. So we're talking a little bit, and then he says, hey, I gotta go. The doctor's coming in. So we hang up. And later that day, he calls me back, must have been after the doctor was in, and says, hey, they told me I'm not leaving here, I'm going straight to Pittsburgh Hospital. They're shipping me right down there. They said, if you go home, you'll be dead by the end of the week. They're taking me straight to Pittsburgh. So that's like a shock to him. So we talked a little bit, and I said, okay, keep me informed what's going on. So they take him to Pittsburgh, and they run tests down there or whatever. And I don't know if it's that evening, next day or whatever. Dave calls back and says, hey, they done these tests, and they call it, I think, acute leukemia. And he said they done tests to determine the one is more treatable than the other. They'll have the results back, but if he has the one, the outlook is not good. And so anyway, it comes back in, and next time I talked to him, a day later or something, I don't know if they had the results right then, but it was right after he had the results, and they said he has the bad one. They told him he has basically 1 month to live. And so at that point, Dave is like, he's taken it very well, saying, hey, I lived a very good life, you know, just appreciative of everything. We talk and talk again, you know, maybe a week later or something. And I remember he called, he said, hey, this may be the last time that we ever talk, you know. And so we kind of say our farewells, and they were right. I mean, within about 1 month, and Dave tells me, he says, you know, I don't want visitors. He didn't want anybody to come see him. That was his wishes. He says, don't come down. I don't want to see. He didn't want anybody to come. Don't know why. I mean, he was actually upbeat about the whole thing, but he told me, you know, maybe he didn't want to be remembered like that or whatever, but he just wanted to go in peace, you know, and rest. They were going to have him on medication and that. Didn't want visitors. So I did get one other call from him. He calls the one day, and he said he's trying to wrap things up, all his affairs, all his, and Dave really, you know, I said, so he's saying, hey, what do you want? You know, he's basically given away everything. You know, he owns a house. He had the shop from his business, his cars, all that stuff. He says, what do you want? You know, I said, Dave, you got brothers, and what about them, your family and that? And we talked some about that, and said, you know, with his brothers, you know, they were separated in years. And he said it wasn't that they didn't get along, you know, but they were just separated. So, and David said, you know, you were always like a brother to me. So he's offering, what do you want? You know, and I had always felt, you know, like I've been really blessed that I didn't want to take anything that somebody could help benefit somebody else. I mean, so I told Dave, I said, Dave, I really appreciate it, you know, but and so he was, then he says, how about his truck? You know, he had a truck with a plow, and I already had a plow in that. So I said, Dave, you know, find somebody that really needs, you know, what you're giving to them and that. You know, I said, if anything, you know, anything I would want, really, I said, Dave, if you got any pictures or stuff from the racing years, you know, and stuff that maybe would mean nothing to anybody else, but it would mean a lot to me, I would take that. And anyway, Dave said, okay, I'll see that you get that. And we talked, and it wasn't, but Dave was dead within the month. He died. And so I never did get any pictures or any of that stuff that he had. But I do got the memories. Me and Dave spent a lot of time together, traveled a lot and that. So I just thought this would be a good time to make a notation of that to wrap up the 1979 season, because that was really probably that was the first year that I started traveling with Dave, really. Before that, I knew him a little bit in that, but it was the beginning of '79 when me and him started traveling together. I do have one other picture right here. I guess it's been laying here that David dropped off one day that I will show this one here. This was another trailer Dave had later in years. That was Dave's there in the black sweatshirt, and that was me putting stuff in one of the cabinets of one of the trailers. This was a race trailer that he had later on. So David dropped that. This was before he got sick. One day I come walking in here to the shop and it was laying here. Thought, where the heck did that come from? And David just, when I was talking to him later on the phone or something, he said, hey, found that photo and I was in it there, and he thought maybe I'd want it or something. So that was from later years, so that wasn't from '79, but I just thought I'd share that photo as well. It's been laying here at my desk and had that. So a little bit off the path there of the racing part, but it goes along with it. And when I was going through all these photos, I just kind of wanted to kind of document the years and the stories that went along with them, more than just scanning in the photos and keeping them. And I guess that's how a lot of this all come about. So I'll conclude this for the 1979 race year. I don't want to put too much in each individual video. I'd rather keep them short, and I know some of the upcoming years got a lot of stories to go with them. So I believe that's it for this one. I'll conclude this and call it for the 1979 year.